What is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video at hand, and today I want to take a look at some games that, in my opinion, were some incredibly underrated titles when it came to the 8th generation of consoles. These are games that were on PS4, Xbox One, Wii U, the 8th generation, right? These games, I believe, unfortunately went under the radar, did not receive the success that they should have, and some of these games, I believe, don't deserve to be as disliked as they have. So with this video, I want to take a look at some of those titles. Now keep in mind, these are in my personal opinion only. This is not going to be ranked in any way, shape, or form. These are just games that I consider to be underrated in my own opinion. So with that being said, let's get started. So starting off on the list is ZombiU. This game was once an exclusive title and a launch title for the Wii U back in 2012, but then would get a release onto the Xbox One and PS4 in 2015 and would just simply be known as Zombie. Now with this game, in my opinion, it's worth playing more on the Wii U than on the Xbox One and the PS4 because I feel like it gives more of the interactive experience with the gamepad, which I believe just makes the game more enjoyable. Essentially what this game is all about is there's a zombie apocalypse in London, and it's up to you to get the basic needs and necessities such as gasoline, food, all that stuff. And you have your own hideout, and you've got a guy called the Prepper that is trying to make sure that you make it out alive and are able to survive during this rampant zombie apocalypse. It is a great game, and I would strongly recommend to go check it out. It is a ton of fun, and it's a very underrated title. Next up is Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, or more specifically, all the Garden Warfare titles that were released during the 8th generation. The best way that I can describe these titles is imagine Overwatch but being played as a third-person shooter. These games are absolutely fun, and as the name suggests, you have two different factions. You have the plants and you have the zombies, and essentially based on the maps, you will either be attacking or defending, along with other objective based modes as well. These games are ridiculously fun. They may look childish, but don't let the childish aesthetic fool you. These games are a blast. If you are into objective based shooters, and if you like to play a game where it does require some team coordinated effort, and you're looking for something a little bit different, a little quirky, and with that third person experience, I strongly recommend giving Plants vs. Zombies a shot. Going down the list is Gears 5. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Gears of War series, and I think it's a shame that Gears 5 and Gears of War 4 seem to fly under the radar when it came to their recognition. And I know people do say that, especially with Gears of War 4, that these two games are not as good as the original trilogy, and I do agree with that. However, what I do think about these games is I still think that they are very notable games, that they're still enjoyable, but out of the two that were released into the 8th generation, I would have to say that Gears 5 is the better title than Gears of War 4. Gears 5, in my opinion, had a better story. I thought it had a better campaign, and I just thought overall that Gears 5 offered the superior experience. I basically got what I wanted out of the Gears of War game. A good story, familiar characteristics, a new upgraded experience, and overall I thought Gears of War was a great series. I'm unsure as to exactly why this game did not get the recognition it deserves, but I do think since it is, in my opinion, an underrated title, that is why I'm going to be putting Gears 5 onto this list. Another game that's worth mentioning is Killer Instinct. Now, Killer Instinct, I have to say, was a really cool fighting game when it first came out onto the Xbox One. And I have to say, I'm very surprised that this game did not get more recognition, considering that the Killer Instinct games were great and fantastic back during the 90s. And Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat have very healthy fan bases and communities to this day. So it is a little surprising in my opinion, that Killer Instinct did not get more recognition. Granted that Killer Instinct has always been kind of considered the lesser when compared to Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. I do think that the game had a very good selection of characters. I really like what Rare did with this game, and of course I do enjoy the fact that you get to play as General Rom from Gears of War and be able to fight off as the Arbiter from Halo. That is a golden experience for me right there. So I have to say, if you want to talk about a fighting game that's underrated from the 8th generation, Killer Instinct is easily a game that comes to mind. Putting a JRPG onto the list is Mega Dimension Neptunia V2. Now, I believe that the Hyperdimension Neptunia games have always been considered to be an underrated series. However, I do have to say, out of all the Neptunia games that were released during the 8th generation of games, I strongly believe that Mega Dimension Neptunia V2 is the best title that has come out during the 8th generation. Now, for those that have never played the Neptunia games or not familiar with it, it is essentially themed off of the real life game industry, and it takes place in a world literally called game industry. And you have these 4 goddesses that are themed off of Sega, Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, and they rule over their own nations, and it is up to them to protect game industry from oncoming threats and to protect their citizens. Now, I have to say, in my opinion, Mega Dimension Neptunia V2 had a great story. I liked how it introduced a new character that was themed off of the Sega Dreamcast. Of course, I love the game references that were put into the game. That's always been a plus for me when it's come to the Hyperdimension Neptunia games. So being this is a game that I do consider to be one of the best in the series, and being an overall underrated series as a whole, that is why I have to put Mega Dimension Neptunia V2 onto this list. Being easily one of my personal favorites when it comes to the 8th generation of games is Titanfall 2, or more specifically, Titanfall 1 and Titanfall 2. These games were an absolute blast to play. These games almost followed the exact same concept and gameplay as Call of Duty, minus the kill streaks and minus the perks. Of course, this is where the concept of wall running and jetpacks were introduced before Call of Duty would implement those aspects into previous Call of Duty installments. And Titanfall almost followed the exact same formula when it came to kill streaks. However, you wouldn't necessarily have an actual kill streak per se, but if you were to die, it would set you back a little. And then once when you get your streak up a little bit, then you get to call in a giant mech, or hence the name Titan, and you would be able to use these giant titans to fight other titans on the map and fight other enemies. Of course, being a first-person shooter, it would have your standard run-of-the-mill first-person shooter game modes such as Capture the Flag and Team Deathmatch, known as Attrition instead. It also had a pretty good story to it as well. And for those that are unaware, Apex Legends is set in the Titanfall universe. So I do have to say, it is a shame that Titanfall did not get the amount of success that it deserved, because it was an absolute gem of a game when it came to its overall concept. And I absolutely love mech-themed games, so Titanfall was right up my alley. I just wish that the Titanfall games had more success and had more of that recognition that it deserved. Continuing the theme when it comes to underrated shooters is Killzone Shadowfall. This game was a launch title for the PS4 back in 2013, and it was criticized by many critics for having a relatively mediocre campaign. While I will say the campaign itself isn't the greatest, I was able to find enjoyment out of it, and it is different compared to previous Killzone titles. But if you are someone who happens to have an open mind and doesn't mind a change of pace, Killzone Shadowfall's campaign might be something you may enjoy. In my opinion, it also has a somewhat decent story to it as well. Now, for the multiplayer, I have to say, I do think the multiplayer is a ton of fun. With the multiplayer, you have different gadgets such as turrets, spawn beacons, etc. And you spawn at your home base, your enemy spawns at their enemy base, and you have your standard run-of-the-mill first-person shooter game modes such as Team Deathmatch, and it can actually be a blast to play. Unfortunately, with this game, I do feel that it is a relatively good game that unfortunately went under the radar when it came to overall recognition, and I do believe that some of the criticism that it got was, in my opinion, a little over the top. I don't think it was nearly as mediocre as some of the critics panned it to be back in its day. So I will say overall, I do feel that Killzone Shadowfall is an underrated title. Continuing on the list is Transformers Devastation. Now, it should come as no surprise to some of my viewers that have seen previous videos of mine that I am including a Transformers game onto the list. But of course, I'm not putting this game onto the list simply because it's Transformers, but because it is also an actual great game. This game was developed by Platinum Games, the same studio that has brought Bayonetta, along with other great titles, into existence. And of course, with Transformers Devastation, I thought it had a pretty decent storyline. I thought it fit pretty well, and being that this is a game themed off of G1, which is my favorite generation of Transformers, of course this was already an easy sell for me. The gameplay was also pretty good. Of course, the game consisted mostly of beat 'em up sections, and I have to say that the combo system, along with the attacks that you could do in the game, when you would follow your combos correctly, and then you would be able to do a vehicle attack where, like, such as Optimus Prime would like charge in once he transforms into the semi-truck, or like side swipe where he does like the donut and attacks the enemy. I thought it was a pretty good game, and it is a shame seeing that this is another game that I believe did fall under the radar, because not only do I think that this is a good Transformers game, but I do think that this is overall a good game in general, whether you consider yourself to be a massive Transformers fan or not. Of course, I do have to say it is a shame seeing that this game flew under the radar, because I do believe that for what it presented and what it had to offer, that it did deserve more recognition. Getting close to the end of the list is Crackdown 3. Now, Crackdown 3 is the only Crackdown game that made it onto the 8th generation, and I do believe that the Crackdown series is very underrated as a whole. But of course, with Crackdown 3, it is still a very fun game. It still has that Crackdown quality to it. For those that have never played a Crackdown game, essentially what you're doing is going through a giant overworld, taking out different bosses, completing different tasks, basically having a lot of fun in a giant sandbox, blowing things up, fighting enemies, completing time trials, and having your abilities increase and improve, allowing you to become more powerful by continuing to fight enemies, grabbing agility orbs, completing different driving challenges, along with a host of other activities as well. Even though some will say that Crackdown as a whole can be repetitive, I do believe, in my opinion personally, that it is very fun, it's very addictive, and I do think it is worth checking out. Of course, it is very unfortunate that with a third entry continuing to be underrated and continuing to be a series that is overall underrated, it is unfortunate to see that this is another title in the Crackdown series that flew under the radar. Finally, wrapping up the list is Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs is an open world game just like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, but it allows you to hack different things in your environment, which you can use as traps, distractions, along with a host of other different options as well to progress through the game. Watch Dogs originally was criticized for not living up to the hype, and was also criticized for not being as interesting as it was presented originally. While I do feel that the story is not an award-winning story, I did find the story to be entertaining and still interesting for what it was. Also, I did find the gameplay to be very fun when progressing through the campaign with the story. While I do understand why the game was considered to be not as great as it was originally portrayed, I still feel that the game is a pretty enjoyable game nevertheless, and I do feel that the game did not deserve to be as disliked as much as it was. I do feel that the game is worth playing and entertaining, and if you are looking for a decent open world game, I would recommend that Watch Dogs is worth considering when you are looking for underrated open world games. Alright, and that will conclude my list for underrated games from the 8th generation. What did you guys think of my list? Were there any games that I didn't mention? Chances are that I simply haven't played it. Feel free to comment in the comment section down below. Give this video a like if you did enjoy, helps boost it up into the YouTube algorithms. More viewers such as you can find videos just like this. And of course, feel free to subscribe because I do upload more videos just like this. where I'd share my opinions on terms of different games and also share my personal video game collection. And be sure to hit that bell icon so you will get notified when I do upload a video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.